Hey super friends, my name is Neil and welcome to this episode 112 of the Get Your Comic Con podcast. We are here fortnightly-ish to bring you a slice of film, TV and pop culture goodness from our studio direct to your listening or watching device. I have lots to catch you up on that has been going on in the last couple of weeks. You will no doubt realise that this podcast is arriving a couple of days later than our usual Wednesday release date, and that is because we have had one mother of a week. Started out this week on Monday, going to a very cool event for a brand new Studiocanal, someone's beeping their horn outside the window, Studiocanal horror movie called Sting, which has been out in the US for a couple of weeks, but arrives in UK cinemas from today, as I am recording this, which is the 24th of May. And that is Sting, which I'm going to be reviewing a little bit later on. Went to such a cool event for it. There were some real life spiders there. No thank you. They were really kindly kept in a separate room where they were soundproofed and kept away from the noisy crowd and the lights and the music and everything. It was a very animal friendly, creature friendly, arachnoid friendly screening, but they had decorated the lobby of the cinema with actors who were webbed to walls. They had a guy that was walking around pretending to be like a bug exterminator who was searching for the spiders that were on the loose. It was a very, very immersive experience for what turned out to be quite a fun film that I am going to be talking to you a little bit more about later on. Now that film also stars an actress who was in another film that I then saw on Tuesday night, which was Furiosa. So I got to go to the UK multimedia screening of Furiosa, thank you very much Warner Brothers, where I got to see that film a few days before it released. It's also in UK cinemas from today, and that was another cool one. We had a little photo op-y type thing that we did before going into the film, and then got to see the film in IMAX, which was huge. But now, I think I hinted at this maybe last episode that there was something else coming up that I wanted to be able to tell you about, but wasn't quite ready or able to. And I can now tell you that then on Wednesday night of this week, by which time a podcast would normally been out, and I would have recorded on Wednesday to release same day, having seen the two films that I wanted to cover, we were invited to interview the cast and crew of Season 4 of Prime Video's The Boys. Very cool, very exciting. We had to pitch for 10 different members of the cast, as well as showrunner Eric Kripke, and we were accepted for a handful of those, which then were due to take place on Wednesday. One of them got postponed to Thursday and then unfortunately got cancelled, and I will tell you about that in just a second. But I sat down with showrunner creator Eric Kripke, who you will know from having created shows like Supernatural, and we got to chat about Season 4, for which I've seen the first 3 episodes, which are all premiering on, is it the 13th or 14th of June? So, second week in June, basically. And then James sat down to interview 3 cast from the series. So he sat down for a group interview with Erin Moriarty, who plays Starlight, Claudia Domet, who plays Victoria Newman, who is a vice presidential candidate in this new season, and we also spoke to Karen Fukuhara, who plays Kimiko. Really fun. Really, really fun. And so I should say, we'll be bringing those interviews to you in the next week or so. I need to edit them. We also need to make sure that none of the spoilers for the first 3 episodes are in there before we're able to release them. So just need to make sure we're not going to spoil anything for you. And then we are good to go with the chat with those 4. We were sadly also supposed to be interviewing, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but this was going to be happening. It was going to happen on Wednesday, then it was going to happen on Thursday, and unfortunately it's not now able to happen. But we were also going to be interviewing Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who is joining the cast as FBI agent Joe Kessler in Season 4, who you will see pretty quickly has an interesting relationship with Butcher, played by Carl Urban. You can see him in the trailer for Season 4 if you've already watched that. Unfortunately, he had to cancel his appearance at the junket, so we weren't able to interview him in the end, but we were so close, and that's an amazing opportunity. It was also a global junket as well, so we're not talking about, it was virtual, but we're not talking about, we weren't just fighting off UK outlets for time with these people. We got into a global group of people that got to speak to these amazing creators and actors. So very, very grateful to Prime Video for that, and we will be bringing you all of that in a future episode of the podcast. Some sad things this week as well. I also watched the final episode of Star Trek Discovery, which airs next Thursday. So the penultimate episode just streamed last night on Paramount Plus, but I have already seen the finale, the final episode. And I can't talk to you about it too much because it's currently under embargo. It's technically embargoed until 2 p.m. on the day that it releases. So what we are going to do, you're going to get a bonus episode from us next week where it's, I say us, me, you're going to get a bonus episode from me next week where I am just purely going to talk about the finale and Star Trek Discovery in general, because I have lots of feelings about it now that I have seen how it's going to end. So there's also that. But coming up this episode, I have got some Star Trek related news to talk to you about. I would open my notebook, but it's underneath the camera. We've got some other news stories to talk to you about, and then I'm going to be reviewing both of the two films that I just mentioned, so Sting and Furiosa, and I also want to talk to you about a brand new Paramount Plus series, which I have mentioned before. The first 2 episodes are now streaming, which is Insomnia, starring Vicky McClure. That's going to be running for the next few weeks until... so it's a 6-episode season. I am going to talk to you about that as well. So without further ado, let's roll that news jingle and head into this week's headlines. First up in the news this week, Spider-Mania is heading back to UK cinemas as we finally catch up with the US and we get re-releases of each of the previous 8 Spider-Man movies, I was going to say 9, across August and September of 2024. So if you're in the States, you will know that each of the Spider-Man films has arrived 1 week after the other, right through Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland, as a way to celebrate the kind of the breadth and length of the Spider-Man franchise. And finally, we now know when this is going to be happening in the UK. So there's been an official press release and a really cool poster from Sony Pictures announcing, I'm going to need to read these to remember them all. So the very, very first Spider-Man, starring Tobey Maguire and directed by Sam Raimi, is coming to UK cinemas again on August the 2nd. That will be followed by Spider-Man 2 on August the 9th, Spider-Man 3 from August 16th. Moving into the Andrew Garfield era, The Amazing Spider-Man is going to be available from the 23rd of August, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 from the 30th, and then we move into the Tom Holland era with Spider-Man Homecoming on September the 6th, Spider-Man Far From Home on the 13th, and ends with Spider-Man No Way Home on September the 20th. Tickets are on sale now wherever you catch your movies, so go and check out each of the Spider-Man films. Maybe see one that you hadn't seen on the big screen when you were younger, if you are not old enough like I am to remember all of them, or just go see your favourites one more time. Maybe go see your least favourite one more time and see if you change your opinion on it. Either way, that is all 8 Spider-Man movies back in UK cinemas beginning from August the 2nd every week through the second half of summer, which is very exciting news indeed for Spider fans. In other Marvel news, if you, like I have been completely addicted to X-Men 97 for the last 9 weeks, well, technically it was 10 weeks ago when it premiered, now we're a whole week on from the finale, then you can kind of dive back into the action of Marvel's now highest rated project on Rotten Tomatoes and most successful fan project, it would seem, by watching the latest episode of Marvel's Assembled documentary. If you are new to Assembled basically goes behind the scenes of each of the major Marvel projects as they are being released onto Disney+. So each of the shows have had a behind-the-scenes special, and a couple of the movies have had behind-the-scenes specials as well. And this is taking us behind the scenes on X-Men 97, seeing how the cast reassembled for this, how some of the original voice actors transitioned into new roles, how they brought in some new actors to take on some of the classic characters, and also how some of the original team came back to work as creative consultants alongside the new team at Marvel Studios in order to make X-Men 97 the absolutely massive... drive away, that's not a sentence, the complete runaway success that it has been for Marvel Studios over the last few weeks. No hints as to where we're going in season 2 or in the future. It's very much a cool project that just looks at how this series came to be, the legacy of the original 90s cartoon, and what that means to the actors and the writers and the creators of that show, and how they used that to make this new continuation that has blown us all away, and just how incredible it has been right from start to finish. So if you would like a little bit more action from X-Men 97, go check that out. That is X-Men 97's Marvel's Assembled episode, available to stream now. It runs at about 55 minutes, available now on Disney Plus globally. Last up is some very unexpected news from the Star Trek universe that came this week. As I was sitting down to watch Furiosa, there were two news alerts that came through about Star Trek, actually. The first was that writer of X-Men First Class and director of X-Men Dark Phoenix, Simon Kinberg, is being eyed by Paramount to take a Kevin Feige type role in the Star Trek universe. So we know that Paramount has been trying to get a new Star Trek movie off the ground for a little while, and they've got a couple of projects that are kind of cooking at the moment, nothing that's in production, but that they are in pre-production on. And it would seem that they're looking to bring in a kind of, almost like Alex Kurtzman is for Star Trek TV, they're looking to bring in a kind of Kevin Feige-like figure that could mastermind the Star Trek universe as a producer. So not writing, not directing at this point, but being a kind of production figurehead that would oversee the Star Trek universe. And it seems that they are potentially eyeing Simon Kinberg for that role. But the news that I really want to talk about is some casting news that came from Star Trek Starfleet Academy. So we've known for a little while that Starfleet Academy is coming. It was officially commissioned and announced a few months ago. We know that they've had a writer's room working on it for a little while, and that writer's room has included Tawny Newsome, who obviously is one of the voice actors from Star Trek Lower Decks. You will know her as the voice of Mariner. The show is being co-showrun between Kurtzman as the head of the Star Trek universe and Naga Landau. Now we know that the series is going to be led by an absolute Hollywood legend in Holly Hunter. So Holly Hunter, perhaps for a lot of you that are listening or watching this episode, will know her from her role as the Senator in Batman vs Superman. I mean, her role in Hollywood goes back decades to the 1980s, according to the blurb that I have in front of me right here. Her breakout role was in Raising Arizona. Her first Oscar nomination was for Broadcast News. She's won she's been nominated 3 more times for Academy Awards, and won in 1994 for her leading role in The Piano. Of course, she is also known as the voice of Helen Parr, aka Elastigirl, in both of the Incredibles movies for Disney Pixar. So, Hunter is joining the cast of Starfleet Academy as the captain and chancellor of the newly recommissioned Starfleet Academy, which is huge. Alex Kurtzman said, "It feels like we've spent our entire lives watching Holly Hunter be a stone-cold genius. To have her extraordinary authenticity, fearlessness, sense of humour, and across-the-board brilliance leading the charge on Starfleet Academy is a gift to us all and to the enduring legacy of Star Trek." There is a new synopsis for Starfleet Academy which sheds a little bit more light on what to expect, and that reads that the series will follow the adventures of a new class of Starfleet cadets as they come of age in one of the most legendary places in the galaxy. Star Trek Starfleet Academy introduces viewers to a young group of cadets who come together to pursue a common dream of hope and optimism. Under the watchful and demanding eyes of their instructors, they discover what it takes to become Starfleet officers as they navigate blossoming friendships, exploring rivalries, first loves, and a new enemy that threatens both the Academy and the Federation itself. The only other thing that we know about the show at this stage is that it is set in the 32nd century. So it's kind of almost, in a way, a sequel series to Discovery, which means it could include cast members from Discovery once that show is over. I can't comment on anything that might be set up or mentioned in the finale, so please don't ask until after 2 p.m. UK time or next Thursday. But in theory, someone like Tilly, who we know left Discovery to work at the Academy and kind of came back on loan for the final season, could in theory become a recurring character or main character in Starfleet Academy. As I said, it's been co-show run by Alex Kurtzman and Naga Landau, and executive producing on the series are also Gaia Violo, Aaron Bayers, Olatunde Onusumsamne, Jenny Lumet, Rod Roddenberry, Trevor Roth, Frank Siracusa, and John Webber. A lot of those names come from modern Trek anyway, so it just follows suit that they're going to be producing on this as well. The premiere episode is written by Gaia Violo, who's obviously one of the executive producers, and yeah, we know that Tawny Newsome is one of the writers on the show as well, so it's going to be interesting to see what she brings to the table. But that's huge casting news for Star Trek. Holly Hunter is the Chancellor and Captain of Starfleet Academy. I guess that, we know from where Disco is set that the Academy hasn't really been, it's not been a thing. This is it really just reopening and re-beginning where Tilly's joining it and it trying to kind of run now. We think that it's reopened on Earth, so we'll get to kind of go back to that potentially iconic San Francisco location, see what that looks like now. and see, nearly said a spoiler from Discovery, see how the Academy will go from the kind of struggling post-burn Starfleet Federation to where it might be in the future when it's a fully functioning, back to full strength kind of force of good in the galaxy. So it's going to be really exciting to see. They haven't said when they're going to start filming officially. We believe it's summer. We know it was in pre-production, so hopefully it will start shooting soon-ish, but it probably won't be premiering until 2025, so there'll be lots of time to see what happens with more casting and where we go from here in terms of what we learn through production before it's ready to air. But for now, really exciting news. Really, really cool casting to see that. That's going to be interesting to see what that role is going to be like. She doesn't have a character name. We know nothing about her other than she is the Captain and Chancellor of the Academy. So welcome, Holly Hunter, to the Star Trek universe. Can't wait to see what you do. Which is the end of the news this week. So remember, you can check out all of the major headlines on our website, which is www.getyourcomiccon.co.uk, and to follow us on social media at getyourcomiccon on all major platforms to pick up the latest breaking news. So, until the next time, that's it. Let's move on to our reviews for this episode. First up in our reviews this week, I want to talk to you about writer-director Kaya Roche Turner's Sting, which is in UK cinemas now from Studiocanal. It's been out in the US for a couple of weeks. This is the film that I was talking about at the top of this podcast that I saw on Monday. The synopsis reads, after raising an unnervingly talented spider in secret, 12-year-old Charlotte must face the facts about her pet and fight for her family's survival when the once charming creature rapidly transforms into a giant flesh-eating monster. The film stars Jermaine Fowler as Frank, Ryan Corr as Ethan, this is really difficult to pronounce. You have to really wrap your mouth around it. Alila Brown as Charlotte, who also plays the young Furiosa in Furiosa. So it's Alila, I hope I pronounced that right, that is in both films that I've seen this week. There's also Noni Hazelhurst as Helga, Robin Nevin as Gunter, Penelope Mitchell as Heather, and Danny Kim as Eric, one of the neighbours. This is a fun one. So I hate spiders. I absolutely cannot stand them. I don't mind them when they're small. Once you get to like yay big, I'm not good. If there is one in the house, I will not kill it. I am humane. I will make sure it goes out through a window. I'm not that bad. But, you know, I don't for fun watch Eight-Legged Freaks or Arachnophobia. But this invite came in from Studiocanal, and I was like, well, it's a horror movie, and we love to cover horror movies here, but it's also spiders, and I hate spiders. So I was in two minds of what to do, but I was like, you know what? It's a giant spider. There is some more context around what kind of giant spider it is that I was like, I can maybe rationalize that I can get through this. It's also completely oversized, so it's fantastical. It's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. The film, it was shot in Australia, and it's an Australian-funded film. Most of Kaya's films are filmed in and set in Australia, but this is set in New York City, despite being filmed in Australia. So it's kind of a new thing for him. But it was worked on by Weta. Now, Weta, if anybody watching this podcast is going to know, is the company who became famous for their work on films like Lord of the Rings. So their creature work is second to none in the industry. And the practical spider called Sting, which is also a Lord of the Rings connection, is fantastic on screen. It's kind of shot in a very similar vein to a xenomorph from Alien. There's a kind of an Alien approach to this across the board. There's a kind of a homage to a chestbuster kind of scene as well. I may be drawing too many parallels there, but certainly the way that Sting the spider, not Sting the entire film, is shot is very much like a xenomorph. It isn't always on screen. It isn't always fully shown on screen. It's often coming out of shadows, or it's moving, or it's kind of, it could be moving to or from the camera, or when it's being used for extreme terrifying effect, is shot in quite an extreme close-up. So like the scenes in the original Alien where you were really only seeing part of the face with the mouth and the tiny little mouth coming out of the big mouth. Think that kind of cinematography. So it's shot really interestingly, and that practical spider that is used for a lot of those sequences is incredible. It really, really makes you squirm in your seat if it's not something that you are particularly fond of, like me. And as anyone knows who reads my reviews, I cover a lot of horror. I am not someone who is particularly jumpy just due to the amount of horror that I have watched, and yet this film made me squirm in my seat quite badly. I jumped a couple of times. There was a couple of times it felt like scares were coming, and I did do the whole, like, I'm looking, but I'm sort of looking away, just because I was quite terrified of the giant spider. It also touched, and this is in the trailer for those who've seen it, so I don't feel like I'm spoiling anything massively, it touched on two of the things that, when I think about spiders, make my stomach churn the most. One of which is you get bitten by a spider and you can't move and it crawls in your mouth, and the other is a spider which is big enough to jump at you from in front or behind and knock you over. Both of those things are in this film, and both of them are absolutely terrifying. So from that aspect, the kind of the horror aspect and the way the creature is shot and the way the creature is rendered on screen, outstanding. Genuinely, really so well done. Where the film lets itself down a little bit is in some of the dialogue and some of the acting. It can get a little bit soapy. So the idea is that Charlotte, played by Alia Brown, is living with her mother and her stepfather, who have also recently just had a baby. Very early in the film, she basically says that to the baby that he is the bane of her life, but it's not a straightforward kind of older child is jealous of new child with new parent. Charlotte has what appears to be quite a good relationship with Ethan, who is her stepfather, played by Ryan Core, who is the supervisor of the building that they're currently living in. Essentially, the whole film is kind of a film in a bottle. They're trapped in their New York apartment block in a blizzard and a snowstorm. Ryan is the building super. The building is owned by Gunter and Helga, who are Heather, the wife and mother of Charlotte, wife of Ethan and mother of Charlotte. It's her family's building. So Ryan is acting as the super. Heather is there looking after her mother, who has a degenerative disease and needs care, and Gunter is also living there. Anyway, so Charlotte is somewhat alienated just due to the family dynamic, but it's not the straightforward kind of child jealousy. And she comes across this spider as she is kind of crawling around the building in the air ducts and takes it in as her pet, only it turns out that there is a lot more to it than it just being a simple spider. But there are some issues within the family and with some of the other residents in the building. They have their own things going on. So Sylvia Coloca, who's also in the film playing Maria, it's never really said outright, but it appears that she has suffered some kind of tragic loss with her family. Danny Kim's Eric is a loner who is like an anthropologist who is doing experiments, all part of his work in his apartment. And you also meet Jermaine Fowler's character Frank, who is an exterminator that gets called in because of the rattling sounds in the walls. And there's just something slightly soapy and slightly cheesy about how some of those interactions play out. So Maria is kind of, I presume, a bit of an alcoholic who tends to dope herself up on her meds just to deal with the pain of the things that she's been through, but it's just portrayed in a slightly predictable way. And likewise, Jermaine Fowler's Frank is, at times, he kind of comes off almost like a Wayans brother character from a scary movie film. And there is the relationship between Ethan, Heather and Charlotte kind of implodes at one point during the film, and I kind of imagine this to slightly be on purpose within the script, but Ryan is very blunt about something with Charlotte, and the entire screen, when it happened, all kind of went oh, in a I'm trying to think of the right way to say it, in a very kind of like, whoa, did he just do that? Like, that it was a dick move kind of way of speaking to his stepdaughter that is really shocking when it happens. But after a split second, your brain kind of goes, "Oh, I'm not sure how and whether that would legitimately happen." There probably are scenarios where it would happen, but it's just something that you're so not used to seeing that the way it's handled stands out to you a little bit when it does. And then the one thing that, I mean, none of this ruined the film for me whatsoever. I haven't finished writing my review yet for the website, but I have already scored it on Letterboxd, and I gave it 2.5 stars because it was entertaining. It wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. The great aspects are kind of counterbalanced by the not so great ones, and overall it's a fun view, and I would recommend that you watch it. But it's not going to blow you away. There is the only thing in it that I think really made me go, I don't know why they did that, was a moment with Eric, played by Danny Kim. He has an interaction with Charlotte where they discuss Sting, and he decides. So Eric decides to take kind of temporary ownership of Sting while he acclimates to a new habitat, and for whatever reason, the script calls on Danny to do this piece of acting where he kind of shows a slightly darker side to his character, and he for someone who is slightly awkward and very scientific and very almost emotionless in his interactions with other humans, suddenly becomes Jim Carrey in Sonic twirling his mustache. It's odd. He becomes a supervillain for a moment, just for a small moment, and there's not enough in his behaviour to preface why that would happen. And that was the only moment for me where I kind of looked at the film and thought, oof, I don't quite know what we're doing here. Other than that, it is a solid horror, albeit one with soapy elements. So I'm going to leave it there and just say that Sting is in UK cinemas now from Studiocanal. Do go and check it out and let me know what you think. If you are not a fan of spiders, I would love to know what you think of it. If you're brave enough to go and watch it, if you are not afraid of spiders and you are a big fan of horror and you go check it out, again, I would just love to know what you think of it. So please do reach out and find me on social media. I'm at Neil Vag on all major platforms. That's NEILVAGG, and let me know what you think. The next thing that I want to review is a brand new series which is on Paramount Plus. It started this week. It is a 6-part series called Insomnia, which is written by Sarah Pinborough, based on a novel also written by Sarah Pinborough. It stars Vicky McClure, Tom Cullen, Lindsay Marshall, and Leanne Best. Actually, I want to mention the kids as well because they deserve a mention. So it is also starring India Fowler as Chloe, and obviously IMDb is not going to give me his name straight away. Where is he? It also stars where is the son? This is terrible. This is why you pre-prepare these things. His name is Smiley. I don't know his surname, but that's his actual real first name, which is awesome. Who plays the son in the show, who is absolutely brilliant. But basically, the synopsis for this series is career-driven Emma Anvil, played by Vicky McClure. Her life takes an unexpected turn. Just weeks shy of her 40th birthday, Emma finds herself ensnared in a web of sleeplessness echoing her mother's own past struggles. But as the past resurfaces, so do haunting doubts and fears, with her mother's sudden hospitalisation, the return of her estranged sister, and an unnerving sense of being watched. Emma is thrust into a realm where truth is not what it seems, and the past never sleeps. I have also reviewed this on our website. It is a mostly spoiler-free review of the whole 6 episodes. I have seen the whole series. Episodes 1 and 2 are available to stream now, and then you will get 3, 4, 5, 6 over the next 4 weeks, each Thursday on Paramount Plus. My verdict was that it's anchored by a tense and simmering performance from Vicky McClure. Insomnia is a riveting watch from its opening prelude right through to the bitter end. Writer Sarah Pinborough has penned a British thriller which revels in its own darkness. 4 stars. So it's a really interesting show. I don't watch a huge amount of kind of British drama. A lot of what I tend to watch is, like you would know from listening to this podcast, is the kind of comic booky, horror-y, sci-fi, action-adventure type stuff, most of which will come from the States. There isn't a huge amount of it which I think you can really deem as British. Maybe, there's shows like Sandman, which are mostly British, but kind of American co-productions. But a lot of the kind of generic is probably a really bad word, but a lot of the kind of typical, let's go typical, late night British dramas, I just don't tend to dive into. They're the kind of thing that I start and then struggle with, whereas this was something that hooked me really early on. I got to go to a special preview screening of episode 1 that was attended by Sarah Pinborough, the writer, and also by Vicky McClure. They showed us the first episode and they gave us a kind of preview Q&A that talked through a lot of what they were trying to do with this show, and it really interested me. It's how do I want to say it? It's almost in a way shot like a horror movie, for one. It has some really wonderful cinematography from Anna Patakarina, and it's directed by Borka Sigmarsson, who the two of them worked together on the Midwich Cuckoo series that starred Keeley Hawes, that was on, I want to say, Sky a year or so ago. And they kind of have a really great relationship in that he really trusts her cinematography and she really understands how strong his direction is. So it's a very visual show to watch. In the first 2 episodes that you can stream now, you're really only scratching the surface of what's happening with Emma, Vicky McClure's character. You learn very, very quickly that she's estranged from her mother. Her mother has had this accident that has landed her in hospital, and that has brought Phoebe, her sister, played by Leanne Best, back into her life after a period of absence. And you kind of learn that the two of them had a very, very sad childhood, in that they were taken into care very early on when their mother had a mental breakdown on her 40th birthday. But part of that mental breakdown is it takes on this slightly supernatural tangent that underpins these first couple of episodes, and then it's not forgotten about, but it's less prevalent through the rest of the series until it begins to wrap up at the very, very end. But part of that is that Emma's mother says to her that it's always the second child in the family who is afflicted with what she calls the bad blood. And the idea of the bad blood is haunting Emma in the wake of her own 40th birthday upcoming, and she begins to not sleep. And the immediate worry for her is it's repeating itself. History is repeating itself. The bad blood is coming back to haunt her. And so it's almost like a self-perpetuating situation whereby she always thought that this might happen because her mother told her that it would happen. Now she's at the time in her life where it is due to happen. She has a bad night's sleep and immediately begins to obsess over this. And that forces her to not sleep anymore. And we all know what happens when you don't have a good night's sleep. You get a good old twitchy eye, and then you just start to fall apart. So the more she obsesses, the less she sleeps, and the more she thinks that the events are really happening. But then she does begin to repeat some of the behaviours of her mother, which means that people around her suddenly begin to look at her as if she might also be completely crazy. And that is the real core mystery: is Emma going crazy? Is this supernatural thing happening to her? What is it? Is someone else in her life the driving force behind this that's trying to make her think this way for some reason? And the series doesn't stray too far from the kind of formula of the British thriller drama, but it does a really good job of balancing character with story. And this is part of the reason why I don't often watch these British kind of dramas like this, because I feel like sometimes they give you a really great story, but you actually don't give an absolute damn about any of the characters. They're so paper thin and irredeemable that you just don't care about them. Or on the other hand, you get these really wonderful, nuanced characters who feel real on the screen, but then the story is so lackluster that it just doesn't ever grab at you. Whereas I feel like this does a reasonable job of balancing both of those things. You really care about Emma, and you sympathise with her husband Rob, played by Tom Cullen. You feel like she's been lumbered with the most moody teenage daughter in Chloe, who's got this new friend Amy, who they've never seen but seems to be leading her astray. And then you have Paul Will, who is this young son. It's Smiley Bradwell. I'd written it in my review. Should have looked there rather than IMDb. Smiley does this wonderful role of being this kind of loving son who is suddenly afraid of his mother for some reason, and she doesn't quite understand why. And so you really do kind of sympathise with them and care for them, and you even get to care for Phoebe, the sister that comes back into her life, because she has her own subplot that is important to the story that makes you sympathise with her and see her as a real person with real wants and kind of desires as well. And part of the character arc of the show within all of this supernatural-ish, horror-ish drama is a story about what it means to reach a certain point in your life that I feel drastically close to, and what it means to kind of transition from that sort of young adult to middle-aged adult, and what that means for the things that meant more to you when you were younger, the things that you want, the things that you lose, like not having a beard that isn't grey that I can keep seeing on camera in front of me. And so for Phoebe, it's about motherhood and family and what family means to her, and for Emma it's about this idea of what's been haunting her since she was a child and what that does to her family because she has managed to get the family around her. It's very intricate in that respect, and what you learn at the very, very, very end, and this is not a spoiler, I'm just talking about constructively in the way the series is put together, you learn that nothing in this series hasn't been placed there on purpose, which is really, really interesting. And it really, one thing that I'm thankful for, I had never read the book, so I have not read the book Insomnia, so I did not know where it was going. And as someone who didn't know where it was going, I found it to be unpredictable. There was some misdirection, be it purposeful or not purposeful, that led me to a certain point, and I was kind of jotting down certain ideas as to what I thought it was going to be at the different points where I felt so convinced that that was what it was going to be, and none of those things turned out to be correct, which is interesting. It was only right before the kind of reveal as to who, what, where, why was really going on, that Cat's come to join us, that I figured out what it really was that was happening. So that, I think, is also very rewarding as somebody who hadn't experienced the book, that it wasn't a show that was simply predictable. It was, you will draw your own theories, and your theory might be correct, in which case you might feel that it's a bit more predictable, or you might fall for some of the misdirection that's in there, which is very, very exciting and makes it a more rewarding journey when you reach the end, knowing that you haven't just simply, from the first episode for the next kind of 5 weeks, known exactly where it was going to go, which I really appreciate. And I think that is all I want to say before, again, I start getting into spoiler territory or say something that I will massively regret. Stylish, cool cast, cool story, a fun 6-episode watch featuring the wonderful Vicky McClure, who I really enjoyed in her role in Alex Rider, which is the only other show I've really watched her in from start to finish. I've not watched things like Line of Duty. So it was fun to watch, and given the amount of love that there seems to be out there for her, for people that I've spoken to about the show, I think national treasure status is incoming for her. So that is Insomnia, that you can watch episodes 1 and 2 of right now on Paramount Plus globally, and will stream for the next few weeks through the episode 6 finale. So you can experience it week by week, or you can wait for another few weeks and then binge it when all 6 episodes are out. But either way, I do highly recommend that you go and watch it. Insomnia, do it. And then last on the review slate for this episode is George Miller, writer and director, written with Nick Lathouris. I've skipped the title. It was Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, starring Anya Taylor-Joy, Chris Hemsworth, Tom Burke, Alula Brown, who obviously I just talked about from Sting. And do I want to see anybody else that's in this cast? No, I think that's all we need to talk about for this. I think they're the main ones. This is a prequel to George Miller's Mad Max Fury Road, which starred Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron from a few years ago. It's a story which focuses on the childhood and early years of Anya Taylor-Joy's Furiosa, originally played by Charlize Theron in Fury Road. And it is a wild 2.5 hours. Again, I've not quite finished writing my review of this yet, but this is a 4-star film from me that is another great example of 2024's sci-fi big screen successes. We had Dune Part 2, also Warner Brothers. We had Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, which, okay, all of these are derived from an already existing IP. These aren't original ideas necessarily in terms of where they come from, but we're seeing this year some really, really big sci-fi movies that look great in IMAX, have these great casts, great effects, and it's really cool to see us having a year of this kind of success outside of horror that's been a staple of the last few years, and comic book movies that have obviously been a staple of the last decade. So the story starts out with Furiosa as a young girl, played by Alia Brown. I'm going to keep bigging her up because she's a really great actress. We're going to see a lot more of her, and eventually transitions to Anya Taylor-Joy, who was obviously the poster girl for Furiosa at this point. It's an interesting one because you go into the film thinking you're going into a short prologue with Alia Brown's version of the character, and then actually Anya Taylor-Joy doesn't show up for nearly an hour, and the only reason I can say that is because I did look at my watch, and that's not because I was bored or because I was struggling with the film whatsoever. I was just curious as to at what point we were in the runtime when Anya Taylor-Joy showed up, just because it was obviously longer than a prologue, because it was more than 5 minutes, and I was starting to think, I wonder how much of this film she's actually in and how much of this is going to focus on the childhood. But what Miller is doing is really taking the time to lay out how Furiosa gets from the community where she's living to where she is escaping at the beginning of Fury Road when Charlize Theron is playing the role, to where she ends up. The arc of the character is really half and half in Furiosa, half in Fury Road, and so really painstaking amount of time is spent to make sure that every key moment in her life that leads her up to where she is when we met her the first time around is in place. So it's wild. There are some really huge moments. There's an extended chase sequence in the middle of the film when Anya Taylor-Joy has really only just been introduced. That introduces Tom Burke as well, and it's this chase on a truck that is insane. They are being attacked as they're driving through the desert. There are people on bikes, there are people in cars, there are people gliding, there are people in kites. There is so much going on above and below, and all moving pieces at the same time. It's really George Miller at his best, doing what he did best in Fury Road. But what he's also doing here is introducing a lot more smaller character moments that make sure that you get a sense of who everyone is. So not just Anya Taylor-Joy and Alia Brown as Furiosa, but you get to learn so much of Dementus, his character as well, who is the role played by Chris Hemsworth, who is recognisable despite the teeth and the prosthetic nose, but who is really enjoying playing this character. There are a few moments where I felt like he veered into slightly Jack Sparrow-ish territory. He is quite flamboyant and quite kind of loose and theatrical, and there are moments where it slightly shifts, almost like he goes just a tiny little bit too far, and it feels like he's doing an impression of Jack Sparrow. But they're only very brief moments, and it's not enough to throw you completely off his portrayal at all. Most of the time he is bonkers but brilliant in the role, and quite terrifying at times as well, which is how he kind of ends up in the push-pull relationship that he has with Anya Taylor-Joy, or with Furiosa in general, both versions of the character that are in the film. Tom Burke is brilliant. He is very integral to Furiosa's final step in going from the kind of child who she's introduced as in this film to the Charlize Theron version of the character introduced in Fury Road. He's unfortunately a bit underused, but when he is in it, he's absolutely brilliant and adds a real amount of heart. His relationship with Anya Taylor-Joy on screen is quite joyous and quite pure, and I would like to have explored that a little bit more. It feels like he comes in and everything is just immediately at its end game for them, and then things happen that lead to the point where she is on her own as she is at the beginning of Fury Road. So I would like to have seen a little bit more of that, but otherwise an amazing piece of casting. All of the major aspects of Mad Max are there. We are obviously slightly earlier in the storyline, so there are still some people who kind of remember or are aware of the world as to what it was like before it kind of gets to the Mad Max world. There is more. It feels from this film like there is more of a memory of the before times than there are in other films that are set later in the timeline. But you know, the War Boys are there. I have to do a song. Immortan Joe is there, this time played by, I'm going to have to look on IMDb to do it, so I'm very sorry, Lakey Hume takes over the role of Immortus Joe, who has, the mask scar, the full-on strange plastic squidgy costume is there that makes him look so creepy. But all the key parts of Fury Road and kind of the Mad Max Saga are there. It's very crazy. It's very bonkers. It's very steampunky. It's very fire and metal and grind and rust. Everything that you would want, particularly if you saw Fury Road, is absolutely still there in this film. This film looks a little cleaner, and I don't know if that's because of the way technology has moved on since Miller made Fury Road. There are some Fury Road scenes which play in the end credits, and interestingly, they seem to have muddied those up, so it suddenly makes that film look really old for some reason, which I don't quite understand why. And maybe that's part of the issue, because it then, if you look at that and then think back to the film that you have just watched, it suddenly makes Fury Road look very clean and clear, which is interesting. I would have liked the imagery to be a little bit more muddy. On the whole, the special effects look great. There's a lot of green screen. There are some effects in... This is what I think happened. I don't know the budget of the film, and I'm not going to look it up now, because I don't want to get into a whole conversation about money, because I don't like to think about budgets too much. But what I wanted to say was, there are some moments when the visual effects in this film are a little wonky. I don't want to pinpoint any, because I feel like once you've actually spotted one, it kind of pulls you out of the film, and that was an issue for me in the first hour, because I spotted a couple of things that to me just didn't quite fit right or weren't integrated perfectly into the environment, and once I'd seen one of those things, I really struggled to not see them for a little while. And what I am really glad to say is that the second half of the film, or from kind of the beginning of hour 2 onwards, those things just aren't there, or at least they were so buried there that I wasn't then noticing them. But the reason that I want to kind of give a bit more context to this point and clarify on this point is I think that what they have done is really use the budget to make sure that the big moments in the film look the best. So the big spectacle moments all looked, as far as I am concerned at this point, several days later, flawless. They look exactly as they should, and it's all great. Everything works wonderfully. There are, CGI characters, things are being enhanced in terms of explosions and fights and blood and gore, and all of those moments look great. It was actually in smaller establishing moments in the film that I noticed that things were a little bit off. So what I think has happened here is that the budget has been used where it really counts, and some of the shorter, quicker moments where, yes, you might spot it, but chances are you might not, are where they've cut corners. Sounds like the wrong thing, but that's where they have used less of the budget. They have ensured that the film looks great where it really counts, and tried to make sure that other moments still look okay, but have cut some of those corners, if that makes sense. So it might be an establishing shot of something that's on screen for all of 2-3 seconds, and a couple of those CGI elements are not quite right, and that is very different to I'm watching a huge set piece of this truck flying down the road and none of it looks great, because that's not true. Those moments really pack a punch. So I think it's a forgivable way of making the budget work for the film. So I thought that was an important thing to say. It's not that the film has some crappy effects, it's that I think it has some cheaper moments that are there because they used the money elsewhere where it really mattered. And again, I think that's everything I want to say about Mad Max Fury Road. It's an experience, and it has been difficult to write a review just because I think it's one of those films that you kind of have to go out there and you experience for yourself, and you will respond to it in your I should probably talk a bit about Anya Taylor-Joy, probably, shouldn't I? Anya Taylor-Joy, outstanding as she always is. I am yet to see anything that she has disappointed me in. She does not do a caricature of Charlize Theron. When Alia Brown is in the film, she looks like a young Anya Taylor-Joy, which is interesting, because having watched Sting the night before, I didn't feel like there was a lookalike situation there, but then in this film I do. And so Alia and Anya have a closer link in the trade-off than I would say early Anya has to Charlize Theron. At the end of the film, it feels like Anya has picked up a little bit of Charlize Theron, and it transitions there. So I feel like what Anya has really cleverly done is in a way, take some cues from the actress who comes before her in the runtime and will come after her in the timeline, which is very clever. And in between that, it is absolutely her own. She has all of the strengths, all of the charisma. Does Furiosa have charisma? She has all of the strength and all of the power that Furiosa has, and she does an impeccable job, absolutely flawless job of playing that character. I will be making sure to follow whatever the hell this woman does next, because her acting career is going to be huge based on what she's been doing recently. And now that is all I want to say about Mad Max Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, which is in UK cinemas now from Warner Brothers. I am losing my voice, so I think it is time to wrap up and say, don't forget that I will be back next week with an extra episode where we're going to wrap up Star Trek Discovery in honour of that series' final episode, and then we'll be back with a full episode another week after that, where hopefully you will get to hear some of our interviews with the cast and crew of The Boys in readiness for the 3-episode premiere of Season 4 on Prime Video. Should probably have talked about the fact it's been picked up for Season 5. We'll do that when we review Season 4. For now, I'm going to stop talking. So don't forget, go to our website, www.co.uk, for all of the latest, or find us on social media at Get Your Comic On, and I will see you next time. Bye!